of Ophthalmology, Professor Dr. Vishali Gupta, before she receives this prestigious Oration Award. Dr. Vishali is currently the Professor of Ophthalmology at the Advanced Eye Center Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research, one of India's most respected tertiary care academic institutes. For more than 2 decades, she has dedicated herself to the field of vitreoretina and uveitis, combining clinical brilliance, surgical finesse, research excellence, and extraordinary mentorship. A clinician scientist of international acclaim, Dr. Vishali has made seminal contributions to ocular inflammation, ocular tuberculosis, retinal imaging, diabetic retinopathy, and complex vitreoretinal disorders. Her work has not merely added to literature, it has shaped the way ophthalmologists across the world diagnose and manage uveitic and retinal diseases. Her journey is adorned with excellence at every step. She won the prestigious International Uveitis Study Group Gold Medal for her outstanding work in ocular inflammation and uveitis research. This is a highly competitive uveitis research award, and it marks the first time an Indian-trained and Indian-based clinician scientist has received this distinction since IUSG's inception. She has received numerous prestigious honors, including achievement awards from the American Academy, P. Shivareddy International Award from AIOS, the Jules Cornyn Best Paper Award, and multiple awards for her outstanding work in uveitis. She occupies a rare and distinguished position in global ophthalmology. She is the president of the International Uveitis Study Group, one of the highest honors in the subspecialty of ocular inflammation. She has also served as the president of Uveitis Society of India. She is the current president of VRSI. The Macular Society and the Club Jules Cornyn, a distinction achieved by only a few select retina specialists across the world. She is an exceptional teacher, mentor, and has trained generations of ophthalmologists, retina fellows, uvea specialists, many of whom today occupy leadership positions across the country and abroad. Her passion for teaching, her clarity of thought, and her ability to simplify the most complex concepts have inspired countless ophthalmologists, including me. Her scholarly output is equally extraordinary, with an extensive body of publication in leading international journals, invited lectures across the globe, keynote addresses, and named oration. Yet, beyond the remarkable list of achievements and awards and recognition, what truly defines her is the relentless pursuit of excellence, her humility, her academic integrity, and an unwavering commitment to patient care and science. Today, as we honor her with this Distinguished Clinical Oration Award, we are not merely recognizing an accomplished ophthalmologist. We are celebrating a visionary teacher, an inspiring leader, a prolific researcher, and a true ambassador of Indian ophthalmology on a global stage. It's my proud privilege to invite Professor Dr. Vishali Gupta to receive the Oration Award. May I request a warm and a heartful round of applause for her.
May I invite Dr. Ashar Shivaraman to read the citation and felicitate the awardee with the traditional Punnada and memento.
Clinical Excellence Oration Award. With profound respect and admiration, this honor is conferred upon Professor Dr. Vishali Gupta, Advanced Eye Care, PGI, Chandigarh, in recognition of a distinguished career devoted to the pursuit of excellence in ophthalmology, marked by exceptional clinical insight, academic leadership, and unwavering dedication to patient care. Through decades of exemplary service, she has advanced the frontiers of retinal and uveitic disease, enriched scientific understanding through prolific scholarship, and mentored generations of ophthalmologists with wisdom and integrity. In honor of her enduring contributions and lasting legacy, she is invited to deliver the Clinical Excellence Oration on 17th May 2026 by Srinatra Eye Care. Lessons from a Lifetime in Ophthalmology Beyond Guidelines and Textbooks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, team, for an extreme honor, and it's such a pleasure to be here amongst all of you. So the topic which Harshali gave me was Lessons from Lifetime in Ophthalmology Beyond Guidelines and Textbooks. Well, it was beautifully put in by the president of Trivandrum Ophthalmology Society that art of medicine cannot be inherited, and nor can it be copied from books. The art of medicine was to be properly learned only from its practice and its exercise. So one must go beyond the textbooks. And this is what I'm going to share with you all, my journey over the next couple of 30 minutes. My first part of the talk is about tuberculosis. And I'm just, for all the youngsters sitting here, I'm just going to talk from the heart, not from the textbook, not from the journals, nothing. So this was the year 1995, the year I joined my first year junior residency in PGI. So there was this beautiful report published in journal Retina from Dr. Biswas. I am sure everybody in the hall knows him, from Shankar Nethralaya, where they enucleated 5 eyes and diagnosed tuberculosis. I was young, I was fresh, and I said, what the hell? What do ophthalmologists do? They remove the eyes for TB because, I thought there was treatment available for tuberculosis. So that was the changing point for me, which shows the career path for me, because I said, how come a disease which has such a cheap treatment available is causing blindness? And of course, my first question was to my mentor and my teacher, Professor Amod Gupta, and he says, because we do not diagnose ocular TB. We do not have means of diagnosing ocular TB, and nobody believes it's TB, and it goes rampant, and then eventually the eyes become blind, and we have to remove it. Well, blindness is not an eye disease. Blindness is something very, very different. These are the paintings from my favorite Pablo Picasso. So there was a blue period in his life when he kind of, went a little bit of depression. And what he painted during that time was marginalization. And all his paintings from blue period depict blind person, which means that blindness due to whatever cause, and especially the preventable causes, it's not only depriving the person of an organ, it's depriving the person of life at large. So what do we do? And truly blessed and lucky to have Professor Gupta throughout my career till today. So this is again one of my favorite paintings of all times, 1891, by Luke Field, the doctor. Here you see a child who is actually dying of tuberculosis. Mother is kind of given up. Father has that look of despair in his eyes, but it's the doctor who's actually thinking what can be done. If you see, the lamp indicates the doctor has been, I'm sure the entire family, but we are talking about the doctor who has been awake probably the whole night because it indicates the lamp and some light coming. He's thinking. Medicines on his side means that he himself is administering and trying to find a solution. So this is my journey began. Professor Gupta told me, well, there is something called PCR, so you can start doing PCR from the ocular fluid. If it comes positive, you may be able to convince people that this is tuberculosis of the eye so that they agree to give treatment. Fair enough. This was the year 1999, so we had our PCR positive, and I was extremely excited to present the results, and this is the first meeting of Uveitis Society of India before it officially actually became USI. That is Professor I.S. Jain, he was our first year, and Professor Amol Gupta. I was so excited. I presented the results of PCR. I thought, wow, I'm coming up with a tool which I can diagnose ocular TB. And guess what? There was so much criticism to PCR being used for ocular TB. Of course, very, very strong criticism. It's like getting the first stone of my life. And this is what I want to tell the youngsters. When people throw stones at you, turn them into milestones. Don't be discouraged, because you're thinking ahead of time sometimes and you say something which others might think it's foolish. No, if you believe in it, go ahead with it. And this is the experiment on the bird. This is the bird, and this is just to show how important air is, how the vacuum can cause death if there is no air. And if you look at this, the person who's conducting the experiment is not looking at the reactions around him. His gaze is straight focus because the reactions are variable. For example, somebody, oh my God, what is he going to do? What is he talking about? It's okay. Let people say what they do not believe in. But if you believe in something, go ahead. So today, when I stand here after so many years, if you ask me today, do I do PCR? No, it wasn't really a magic, but it gave us the tool for the Western world to accept in good journals as to what were we calling ocular tuberculosis. And that's how the phenotypic description started. When do you suspect tuberculosis? Granulomatous capes, intermediate uveitis, which does not have pars planitis, large snowballs, occlusive vasculitis, granulomas, tuberculomas, and the entity that we described for the first time, serpiginous-like choroiditis. This was a journal Ophthalmology, 2003. After that, over the next several years, we just kept on publishing how anti-TB treatment helps to reduce recurrences and brings remission in more than 80% of the patients, which means if you recognize the disease early and give simple, straightforward ATT, probably you are preventing enucleation in several of these eyes. So exactly after 100 years, when Robert Koch got his Oration Award, this is the Nobel Prize, he's coming out of the hall, we were also able to say that, okay, ophthalmologists need to give ATT for ocular tuberculosis, and I would like to give credit to all my mentors who have been instrumental. Then came August 2015, that was the time, this is the picture taken at Professor Gupta's house at the time of his superannuation. So it was kind of, now my journey is all by myself. What had we achieved till then? We thought we were recognized form of extrapulmonary disease. We had described a lot of protein manifestations. that TB produces in the eye. And we had said quite a few things, and there was an initiative by Government of India to develop Index TB guidelines. With the effort of LVP group, we found entry into that group, and we went with a lot of enthusiasm saying ocular TB exists. And we are talking of year 2015 or 16, 2016. They did not believe us. They said there is nothing like ocular TB because you do not show us the AFB positive from the eye. We tried to argue how much recurrences have been reduced, whatever, and came the second major stone thrown at me was, there are only few groups which believe that ocular TB exists. There is PGI and there is Shankar Nethralaya and there are a couple of others, but then everybody does not believe. You do not have any international guidelines or consensus. I said, okay, let's have international guidelines. And I conceived this idea, and the first call was actually made from the airport lounge of Singapore. I just thought, let's have a collaborative ocular TB. And this is Carlos Pevesio, chief at Morphales. Rupesh, many of you might know, is in Singapore. And Kwan is chief of ocular inflammation at Stanford. So we said, okay, let's collect the data of TB all over the world and see what is TB only seen in PGI and Shankar Nethralaya, or there are people elsewhere in the world also see. This is how the group started. We had a small meeting in San Francisco during one of the major events, and soon we had the group growing. We had 25 centers from 25 countries. We collected the data, no money. The data was collected, the platforms were made, encryption done, everything, all by the students of PGI, Stanford, Singapore, who joined. A lot of people made their career out of it, actually. So we collected the data, we did major symposia all over this. We had loads and loads of publications in all the major impact journals as to how TB exists all over the world. There were 972 patients, and what were the variations, what were the challenges, and all the things. And these just, these are just the publications, but I will just simplify all these publications for you. There was no evidence of systemic TB in more than 90% of the cases, which means you do not have to tell pulmonologists and let them bully you that there is no need for ATT. ATT is required because there is disease in the eye. ATT is not required because there is disease in the lungs. Posterior uveitis was the most common phenotype, was serpiginous-like choroiditis. Monteus, which is a very simple, cheap test, is positive in 87% of these cases, TB Gold in 89%, and these were the tests which were most commonly performed all over the world. PCR was not commonly performed because we have in-house PCRs, and neither was it trusted. Chest CT was better than X-ray when you are detecting old exposure, and here also I would like to say that when we are doing chest imaging, we are looking at old exposure, Gons focus, calcified lymph node. We are not looking at active pulmonary disease because it's not going to be there. So we established this group was COTS, and over a period of time, major societies joined us, IUSG, IOIS, and the Foster Immunology Society. And we created these three words. I created them, Together Towards Tomorrow. So once we have the real world data in hand, we thought, let's develop some consensus guidelines where experts from all over the world come together. And we had the experts who had more than 15 years of experience and more than 100 PubMed indexed publication in the field of uveitis. Of course, majority of them had much more than 100, that's besides the point, but this was the bottom line. So we tried to establish the agreement for initiating anti-TB in patients with ocular TB using modified Delphi approach. It was a very serious meeting, and you can see, we did it in Chandigarh. This is the stage 2 of Delphi, where the thought process, discussions, arguments, and we also had, this is Doug Jabs. He's the one who's created famous Sun criteria for uveitis. And Onmin Kohn is the president of European Pulmonology Society from Imperial College London. So we had all the pulmonologists and all the biggies together, and of course, Professor Gupta. And we came up with the guidelines. It was very tough. And this was taken at the end of 2 days, that meeting, and you can see how relieved I look. So again, both the reports all are in ophthalmology, but to summarize, if you see serpiginous-like choroiditis, serpiginous choroiditis does not have inflammation in the eye. Serpiginous-like choroiditis will have few cells, sometimes anterior segment inflammation, sometimes vasculitis. So if you recognize this type, you will give ATT whether all the 3 tests are positive, 2 are positive, or even 1 is positive. Because this is the phenotype which is so typical for TB that experts agree to give ATT even if one of the tests was positive. In contrast, if you see anterior uveitis, probably even if your tests are positive, you are not still sure it is TB. And same is for the intermediate uveitis. So you will treat anterior uveitis not in the first go, only have recurrent episodes, and if 3 or at least 2 tests were positive. Many a times you do vitrectomy for what we used to call Eales disease. Now we no longer call it Eales, it's TB, and you see PCR positive, but the disease is inactive, no need to treat. The papers were published with lot of course, the chagrin of what I call statistical chagrin. And if I am to read, I find it difficult to interpret what is written in these difficult papers. And I will come to the next step. For me, the victory was when ICMR invited me to develop standard treatment workflows of India, and ocular TB, we developed the workflow of this. At least they recognized that ocular TB is a form of TB. They recognized it because it came from international experts. As long as it was coming from PGI and Shankar Nethralaya, they were bullying us, But anyways, they are great. So then came the next, that you have published, but these consensus guidelines are so difficult. I'm sitting in my busy clinic, so I can't look at the guidelines and see which one to do. And then we created this something called COTS calculator, which is very simple. You add name, age, you add the clinical phenotype, ethnicity. Once you have ethnicity, it automatically gives you which part of the world the patient is from. Is it endemic, non-endemic? And just the 3 tests, Montius, gamma, interferon gamma, and chest imaging. And it tells you that there is a very high probability amongst experts to consider initiating anti-TB treatment. So you can show it to your pulmonologist or to your internist and tell him that we want TB treatment to be given to prevent recurrences in this patient, so please do that, because now you have a scientific evidence to do it. Did people stop? No, we kept on getting letters from our Indian colleagues that COTS consensus recommends over-treatment. Guys, we never said that all uveitis with positive Montius treat. We said rule out everything else positive. If you feel your clinical judgment, it is TB, and the test come positive, then these are the guidelines for treatment. And I love this article, hyposcelia. Hyposcelia is the deficiency of clinical skills, and I tell my fellows that you have to develop a clinical skill which is beyond your OCTs and your imaging. It is the clinical skill which is not dependent on chat GPTs and bots and so on. It's you see the patient and you know in which direction you are going. So that's what. Pay attention to the phenotype. You should know about pre-test probability. If you are seeing a patient which looks like straightforward HLA-B27, why would you do TB test for him? And if TB test come positive, you can't say courts told us to treat. No, we said you treat only if the phenotype is suggestive of TB. Rule out differentials, don't overdiagnose, don't overtreat, and do not blame the test or COTS group for any hyposcalia. So, of course, the next was that COT guidelines. First, they told us to go international. When we came from international, came the criticism, oh, TB is not seen by international experts. The guidelines have come from international. So we validated the guideline published in JAMA, both the reports and in ocular immunology. And then the Uveitis Society of India honored me with Venkataswamy oration on the same topic of ocular TB. So my journey started on ocular TB in 1999 in the Uveitis Society first meeting, where I was kind of, we take water from the tap and it comes positive PCR for TB because TB is everywhere, so you can't tell us that PCR is positive. So if you believe in something, just persist. So before I go to my second part, which is much shorter, for the sake of youngsters, the lesson learned. There will be clinical scenarios where the textbook and guidelines will not provide answers. Think beyond, start working, one step at a time. There will always be criticism from your teachers, from your mentors, from your seniors, from peer. Do not let it discourage you. Changing clinical practices takes years. So patience, focus, hard work. They would make the difference eventually. The second part of my journey was about white dot syndrome. I was given present a symposium as a resident. I did not understand a thing. I said, what is this? 10, 15 diseases together, I hated them. So what exactly was white dot? White dot was described by Lee Jampol, 1984, where he said that he saw 11 patients with white dots in the fundus, some transient visual disturbances. He called it MUDS, multiple evanescent white dot syndrome. Fair enough, straightforward. What happened? Over a period of time, people kept on adding diseases to white dot syndromes. So you read the standard textbook, it has almost so many diseases included as white dot syndrome, which begins with MUDS and it includes even serpiginous choroiditis, sympathetic ophthalmia, God knows what all it includes. So it's from a single elegant description, it went to catch all category. The story of diagnostic shift. And then came the buzzword MMI. Everybody was talking about MMI as if they understand everything about imaging. That always, fascinates me when I hear people talking about MMI, describing the dot as a Muller cell. And I think to myself, really, are they seeing Muller cell in that white dot? Or is it just they read somewhere and they think it is what it is? So I wanted to sort out white dots and I wanted to make sense of imaging so that everybody is not doing every imaging for everything in uveitis, what I call tailored imaging. So this was the time when I took over as a president of International Uveitis Study Group, and this was the project I started. 2 aims. One, we should have a standardized criteria for use of multimodal imaging in non-infectious posterior uveitis, and a subset of that was to prove that all these entities which have been included in the white dot syndromes were distinct and should not be put under common umbrella. And I wish to tell you, I had no money for COTS and I had no money for white dots. So both these multicentric were done just by the goodwill of people who believed We all believed in ourselves without any penny. So this is Janet Davis from Miami, who was my first partner in crime. And over a period of time, Doug is now the director of clinical research for the entire Hopkins, not only ophthalmology. David Saraf is in UCLA, a medical retina, and Alessandro from Milan. A very detailed methodology. I will not bore you with it. I will just tell you a few couple of things we did. First, we surveyed the retina physicians and uveitis physician and asked, do you believe the term white dot syndrome should be abolished? And 90% of them felt that they should be deconstructed. Majority of them felt that of all the diseases which have been given in the textbook, probably only first 4 are the 5 are the ones which they commonly used. We had a very detailed methodology, which is nominal group technique, as to how will we reach the consensus, and all these 11 reports are in American Journal of Ophthalmology. So, without going into this, we described the minimal imaging criteria, and I'm going to give you example of just 4 or 5 diseases. Serpiginous like choroiditis, you do not need anything to diagnose, no imaging modality. Your clinical acumen is enough to decide it. You want to look at the disease activity, you look at the OCT. The OCT, which shows preserved Bruch's membrane with outer retinal hyperreflectivity and choroidal involvement. This indicates that the disease is active. You could follow it up with autofluorescence, but if you want to have a difficulty in diagnosis, then you do other imaging. Similarly, I am not going to talk about this, but we found that all the diseases, the 5 diseases that we decided, we first described each disease imaging characteristics. So these are all in AGO for anybody who wants to report, who wants to read. And this was one of the 2 important reports, according to me. One is we gave the minimum set of imaging. So don't let people in the conferences intimidate you that if you do not do ICGs or if you don't do high resolution OCTs, you won't be able to diagnose. No, this is what we have come up with. I particularly had my sub-Saharan colleagues in mind who are always, who do not have access to technology and who always feel that probably you need MMI for everything. No, you don't. So this gives you a very specific guidelines that you don't need Octas for uveitis, for heaven's sake. So please don't show us those dark spots on Octa because it has no role. So this is kind of making sense of the imaging. And the report number 10th was about what are the endpoints. When do you call disease active? When do you call it inactive on different imaging modalities? All the reports are open access reports, so you can download the free article anytime you feel like knowing about it. And finally, in Singapore 2024, we had a very intense 2 days meeting and where we came up deconstructing white dot syndromes. And very soon you will see a white document where all the major retina societies are endorsing IUSG with a term calling retiring white dot syndromes. So the symposium that I hated doing so many years ago, at least I have retired that white dot so that each one of you don't have to mug up those things which honestly do not make sense. So this you will see probably on 1st of June, it will be out. So overall, my concluding slide, lessons learned. You can challenge what is written in the standard textbooks. A single voice may go unheard. A collective voice is difficult to ignore. Collaborate, collaborate, and collaborate. You do not always need foreign degrees to lead. I'm very proud. I never did any fellowship. There was no fellowship in India at that time, but I never stepped out of the country because I felt my mentor had so much to teach I do not need a stamping. And in my times, it was very common. The first slide used to be, oh, I'm trained in such and such country with such a such person. I never had that slide to show off. You just need vision, commitment, and hard work. I'm very, very thankful to my mentors, Professor Amod Gupta, Professor Dogra, my wonderful faculty colleagues who are like my strength, and my fellows who are my John. I love my fellows. And some people who have stayed with me for years and years together. It has been a beautiful journey. And for all the youngsters out there, spend time with your family. Don't ignore this. I would like to thank my husband, who's chief of GI surgery. He's Rajesh at PGI, a strong pillar of strength, and my daughter, who just became 3 weeks ago, assistant professor at Washington University. Thank you very much, Sri Netralaya, for the very, very kind honor, and truly, truly humbled to be here amongst. And thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that truly inspiring and insightful oration.